Mississippi Hardy, and I'm with the Union County Heritage Museum. And I am with Mr. Caleb White, and he's going to be telling us about this house, and he's at the Folk Festival Day here at the Union County Heritage Museum. So, what's your name?
My name's Caleb White.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a man of two trades, so I do some building and then physically, but I also do kingdom work for the Lord because I do preaching as well. The two go together well.
Did you build this by yourself?
I did. They would take, to reinforce it, they would make wooden pegs and tie these boards in together. They would drill holes with hand tools if they had one, or whatever they would do, and they would take and use the pegs to tie the different main parts of the structure together. So if they had beams, sometimes they would have beams running right here inside, and they would peg them together. Generally, they would try to use woods that didn't rot as quickly because they needed this to hold up for as long as they could. And they didn't have treated lumber back then as well. So the way they built houses today is quite different than how they used to build houses. Used to, they didn't have the tools that we have today, so they had to use the bare stuff that they did have. They had axes and they had logs. They just cut down trees with an axe, and it'd be a round log. And they didn't have, most of these people didn't have sawmills, especially here in Mississippi. A lot of people were poor. But they would take and join them up in the corners, and they would lay the logs out before they ever started putting it together. They'd get all the pieces cut, notch out, and have it planned how they would put this together. Because if they didn't start planning before they put it together, it ended up not turning out too well by the end. So they took it. They would frame out their doors, and usually it would have a window either on the side or right there next to the front, or they'd have one on each side of the door. And a lot of them, they didn't even have actual glass windows. They would have just an opening and a cloth draped over top of it. And the doors, usually they tend to make them out of wood as well, but sometimes they would use, like in the summertime, they would take the door off and just put a drape over it, just some kind of cloth to keep the bugs out. Sometimes they had floors and sometimes they didn't have floors. This one here, it don't got a floor, and because most people, they didn't have the means of putting the floor in theirs. So some of them, they just opened it and they had dirt floors. They would either have sod roofs or they would take and cut shingles out of wood and put it on the roof. They worked with what they had. They used their hands and they used their minds, and they made something from just their surroundings. For the most part, they held up pretty well.